Suspension trainers versus resistance bands. Which one is better? Hi, I'm Jonathan Pritchett with Theology, Geek, and I'm going to spare you the suspense of having to wait to the end of the video for my verdict and just tell you up front that I think both are fantastic. That's why I use both. So if you want to know why, that's not just a cop-out answer, but what my reasoning is behind it, you'll have to listen to the rest of the video. For me, if I thought one was more effective than the other, I would just stick to using one. I'm not just a gear junkie for the sake of it. I like having multiple options for exercising. I've made no secret about that, but I also like to have a purpose and use everything that I own. So when I get things that I don't care for, I sell them secondhand on Amazon or Facebook Marketplace or eBay or whatever, or I give them away to patrons. Because as far as suspension trainers go, I love suspension training. In fact, I have a series coming up that's going to compare 9 different suspension trainers and then gym rings. And I'm going to unload most of those after the series is over. I bought free weights for a video, used them to compare them to resistance bands, and then immediately sold them because they didn't add anything. And it just made me realize I don't miss going to a gym, and I don't miss free weights, and I don't miss machines and all of that anyway. So I just got rid of them. But they were useful for the video that I shot. And so after I'm done with the suspension trainer series, some people are going to end up with these suspension trainers, whether I give them to patrons or secondhand buyers on the market, because I don't need all of them, and they're not all created equal. So stick around and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, if you want to catch that series covering everything from the T2 ISO trainer, which I've already covered, to the Angles 90 sling trainer, to the TRX Elite system, to the Liebert Hit system. I've got all kinds of suspension trainers, so we're going to look at each one of those. But as far as resistance bands and suspension trainers go, they're both portable. They both take up relatively little space. They're relatively inexpensive, especially when you compare them to bars and dumbbells and plates and kettlebells and racks and benches and all of that. And for most people, like 95% of everyone that would ever watch this video, they're going to get you just as good of results as going to the gym or using free weights. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. So as far as better in terms of not just my subjective preference, but better in terms of what can we objectively compare between the two, resistance bands, they operate on the linear variable resistance, which means no matter how much you pre-stretch the band to get starting tension, the more you stretch the band out, the more tension is created. So it's always going to be less tension at the start of a rep than at the end of a rep. With suspension trainers, it follows basically the same as any body weight, or even some machines in free weight, the strength curve on that. It's really similar, if not identical, in a lot of cases. So I like having the option of both. They both have their pluses. So it's good to use both, but that's one objective difference. Another objective difference is resistance bands. You can do a lot of exercises without them being anchored to anything other than your body, whereas you have to anchor the suspension trainers. Even the T2 ISO trainer, you don't need like a door or an overhead, but you still have to, attach the housing unit to to the anchor strap to put under your foot or whatever, like it's a resistance band. So more moving parts there, but that's the only one that doesn't require an anchor point above your head. And of course, with the T2 ISO trainer, you can also anchor it from the side for certain exercises or whatever. But for like every other suspension trainer on the market, and that T2 ISO trainer is not just a suspension trainer, but for the sake of this video, for virtually you need 1 to 2 anchor points that are high. So that's an objective difference. Now, when it comes to anchor points for suspension trainers, I mean, they'll all anchor to a door. I have ceiling mounts that I've got 3 of them now, and you can get those for like $12, $13. TRX sells them for like 25 to 30 bucks. So you can get the same thing for like 12 or $13. They're really high quality. I have 3 of them in my house. Or you can find a branch, or something to hang off of for your suspension trainer if you want to train outside, which I love doing, especially this time of year. So that's something to consider. Is you're always going to need an anchor point, though they're not that hard to find really if you're on the hunt. But for a lot of exercises, resistance bands don't need them. So that's an objective difference. But as far as like your basic movement patterns for all the exercises you do, the vertical push, the vertical pull, the horizontal push, the horizontal pull, the squat, the hinge, the rotation, and the carry, they both do everything but the carry. But they don't do them in the same way. Now, like I said, you're not going to be able to do carries, like farmer carries or anything, with a light bag of bands or a little bag that has your suspension trainer in it. So that's out, but all the other movement patterns both cover, they just cover it in different ways. And not all the suspension trainers cover the vertical pull in the same way. And I'll show you the different ones in the video series that I got coming up of what you can do for that. But they all cover it one way or the other. Now, as far as like hinge movements, like you cannot do any sort of deadlift type exercise with a suspension trainer. Most of your hinge movements are going to be, glute, hip, bridge movements. So if deadlifting is important to you, then you're going to need to use resistance bands for that, for any of your deadlift variations. But the problem with that is you have to buy more equipment, because once you start using a lot of resistance for your deadlift movements, it starts bending your feet in at the ankles. So you need something like a plate, and those things are pretty expensive, anywhere from 150 to 300 bucks, depending on where you get and when they're available. So there's that to consider. So how important, if deadlifts aren't even important to you and you don't need the deadlift to get a good physique, don't think that you have to do deadlifts or anything. Then you don't really need it for either resistance bands or suspension trainers. So that's just depending on if you want to do that one particular exercise. Just know that objectively there's no way to do it with a suspension trainer. So that's important to keep in mind. Now, in terms of building muscle, like we talked about, linear variable resistance versus just like a normal bell curve type strength curve for body weight suspension training. You have mechanical tension with both. You can induce metabolic stress with both, and of course you can cause muscle damage with both. When it comes to progressive overload, they handle this differently. Like with bands, you can always stack more bands. But with suspension trainer, it's about how you leverage your body and at what angle. And at a certain point, even if you're anchored overhead to where you're not backed up against a door, or even if you got a branch that gives you plenty of space away from the tree, or you're not backed up against anything, even if you angle yourself to where you're basically horizontal parallel to the floor or the ground, you run out of any more ways to leverage your body. You're going to have to start adding body weight, like a weight vest or something, at some point to continue to progressive overload. Now, you can go a long way before you're able to do that without even having to increase the volume by just adjusting your angle. And even with leg training, leg training, some people say, you can't really train legs with suspension trainers. Nonsense. You can get great leg workouts. You can do different things, slowing your rep speed down, exhausting your muscles that way, training to failure without having to do rep after rep after rep. If you just do more slow, controlled reps, things like that on your squats, you can do single leg squats or pistol squats. You can do all kinds of things to make your leg exercises, suspension trainers, without even adding a weight vest. In fact, if you go to the YouTube channel, the TRX Traveler, only within the past year, or maybe a year and some change, has he started using a weight vest when he's training his legs, because he's developed his whole physique on mostly suspension training with the TRX for years. And while he may tell you that his legs aren't as big as he'd like them to be, I mean, he's got more muscular legs than I do. So go figure. He can help you if you're like at the advanced stage. But for most people who are beginner or intermediate, you're not going to even need a weight vest for body weight leg training until down the line anyway. You can get a great leg workout. But the progressive overload issue, theoretically, tips in the band's favor just because you can always add another band to make it more resistance, whereas at some point you run out of leverage. There's ways to get a good leg workout. I've crushed my legs on a suspension trainer, no problem, especially with a weight vest. Whether it's a 40-pound vest or my 20-pound vest at home, whatever, I get a good workout. So legs, no problem. So progressive overload is easier to track, though. Instead of remembering where you angled your body, you can just remember what band you used and last time, and whether you want to go up a band, grab closer to your anchor point to create more starting tension, or stack bands to track it. It's a little bit easier with bands. But still, while I think objectively there's more in favor towards bands, there's that subjective element to where I do like having the strength curve of body weight training with the suspension training. I do like the workouts that I get, especially with the T2 ISO trainer, which to me is one of the best products to ever be released for home exercise equipment. So I just love it. So for me, neither one is better, but I guess in terms of tracking progressive overload, if exercise options means anything to you, and having more variety, probably objectively resistance bands eke out a little bit. But as far as like terms of fun and or at least what I enjoy and wanting to have the best of both, I go with suspension training. Now, something like the T2 ISO trainer also has the bungee cord, which in effect gives you everything that you're getting out of resistance bands anyway, plus it's a suspension trainer. So there's that as well to factor in. Though they just have one bungee option right now, though I think the company is looking at getting resistance bungee cords at different levels, some stronger, some not quite as strong. So that's going to be even more flexible for that. And when that happens, I mean, that almost gives you the best of both worlds in one product. So there's that to consider. But on the whole, I like to use both. I encourage people to use both. And if you're wanting to get into exercising at home and you're not interested in spending a whole lot of money on weights, you can go to Walmart and get just the door. All it does is anchor to your door. You can get their Spry suspension trainer for $15, then buy a $10 to $15 resistance band to go with it. Or like I said, you can get these in a prior video. I showed these flat stretch bands, and in fact I developed a whole workout program that my patrons can access, 12 weeks, that just $25 worth of stuff. $10 for the 3-pack flat bands, and then the suspension trainer from Walmart that hooks onto your door. Have a whole 12-week program based around that. And you can start there. You're out $25 and you can see, do you like using both? Do you like using one more than the other? Well, you're only out $25, which is, not a whole lot for home gym equipment. And you'll always have those, even if you decide, well, I think I'm going to go into the suspension training. I'll still have my flat bands if I don't ever want to dig those out, but I'm going to go ahead and buy a nice suspension trainer. Or you can buy a nice set of bands, but you'll always have that $15 thing tucked away in a drawer somewhere in case you just in the mood for something different. So that's a very inexpensive gateway to get into that, and even if you upgrade, it won't really make too big of a difference. Depending on which direction you want to go, you want to get a nicer suspension trainer or a nicer set of resistance bands to train with. So those are my thoughts on that. I encourage you to go that route to see which one you'd like better. But if you're already into body weight, suspension trainer got a whole series, go through different options on that. I've got tons of videos already on resistance bands that you can go check out on the channel and see what you can get done with those. And there you go. That's what I think. I think you can't go wrong either way, and that you should use both, but it's entirely up to you. If you agree with what I'm saying, let me know in the comments. If you disagree with anything that I'm saying, let me know in the comments. If you like the video, click the like button. If you didn't like the video, you can click the dislike button. I don't really care either way. And if you want to support Theology Geek Fitness, you can become a patron at patreon.com/theologygeekfitness. Appreciate you watching this video. We'll see you in the next one. God bless.